Have you ever wondered why some people simply don't share their lives on social media? In a world where posting has become almost obligatory, there exists a mysterious group that refuses to participate in this digital spectacle. What goes on in the minds of those who choose virtual silence? As Alan Watts would say, silence is sometimes the most powerful argument. Perhaps these individuals have discovered a profound truth that escapes most of us, trapped in the vicious cycle of likes and validation. Or is it a disguised fear of exposure? Prepare for a philosophical journey that will reveal the psychological secrets of those who live their lives away from the digital spotlight, and why this might be the path to a freedom you didn't even know you were seeking. In the quiet moments when our phones lie face down and our screens go dark, a curious thing happens. We begin to rediscover ourselves. This journey into the authentic self is what fascinated Alan Watts, the philosophical pioneer who long before social media predicted our modern struggle with identity. He often spoke about the masks we wear, saying that trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. Today, these masks have gone digital, filtered and curated for maximum appeal. Consider how we carefully craft our online personas, selecting the perfect photos, editing our thoughts down to punchy captions, measuring our worth in hearts and thumbs. But what about those who abstain from this performance altogether? These individuals have stumbled upon a profound psychological insight: the digital identity paradox. The paradox is simple yet profound. The more we try to present ourselves online, the further we often drift from who we truly are. Those who don't post on social media may understand intuitively what Watts taught, that our true nature cannot be captured in pixels and characters. They've recognized that there's something liberating about not having to translate their experiences into content for consumption. When we constantly perform for an audience, we begin to see ourselves through their eyes. Our actions become colored by potential reactions. Did I enjoy this meal, or am I just excited about how it will look on my profile? Was this vacation meaningful or merely photogenic? These questions don't plague the non-poster. Instead, they experience life directly, without the mediating filter of how it might be perceived. Watts would appreciate this approach, as he often emphasized direct experience over abstract representations. He believed that our obsession with symbols and images, now manifested as likes and shares, disconnects us from the raw, unfiltered nature of reality. The psychology behind this abstention reveals something fascinating. Many non-posters aren't antisocial or technophobic. Rather, they've made a conscious choice to preserve the boundary between their lived experience and their social presentation. They understand instinctively that not everything needs to be shared to be validated. This choice reflects a deeper understanding of what Watts called the wisdom of insecurity, the acceptance that life is fluid, ever-changing, and impossible to pin down in static posts. By not attempting to crystallize their identity online, non-posters remain flexible, authentic, and present in ways that heavy social media users might not. Research has begun to support what these individuals seem to know instinctively. Studies show that constant social comparison on platforms leads to decreased well-being, while authentic living correlates with greater happiness. The non-poster has found a shortcut to this authenticity by opting out of the comparison game entirely. They've discovered that when nobody is watching, we're free to be experimental, contradictory, and genuine. We can change our minds without needing to delete our previous declarations. We can grow without explaining our evolution to a digital audience. We can fail privately and learn deeply without the pressure to spin our mistakes into inspirational content. This brings us to perhaps the most important psychological insight of all. Identity is not static content, but an ongoing process. As Watts said, You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing. Ned Lee, non-posters seem to understand this fluidity intuitively. They've recognized that any attempt to capture and display their essence online will inevitably fall short. So as we move forward, perhaps we should ask ourselves, what parts of our identity exist purely for display? What aspects of ourselves have we neglected because they don't photograph well or can't be easily explained in a caption? And most importantly, who might we discover ourselves to be when we're not busy telling the world who we are? There is a special kind of bravery in choosing to remain unseen in an era where visibility often equates to value. As we transition from examining identity to exploring courage, we find that the decision to stay anonymous isn't about hiding. It's about a profound form of self-protection that Alan Watts would have deeply appreciated. Watts often spoke about the courage to be oneself without external validation. He said, "The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless." Those who abstain from social media posting may understand this principle in their bones. They've realized that the constant documentation of life can fossilize experience, turning living moments into digital artifacts. In our current culture, there's enormous pressure to expose ourselves, our achievements, our thoughts, our relationships, even our meals. This exposure has become so normalized that abstaining can feel like swimming against a powerful current. Yet those who resist this pull display a quiet courage that deserves examination. Consider the psychological strength required to experience something beautiful without immediately sharing it, to enjoy an accomplishment without broadcasting it, to have a thought without publishing it. This restraint isn't about shyness, it's about having such a secure sense of self that external confirmation becomes unnecessary. The anonymous individual in today's world has discovered something powerful. Privacy isn't just about keeping secrets, it's about maintaining sacred spaces where authentic growth can occur without scrutiny. These spaces allow for vulnerability, experimentation, and even failure, essential elements of psychological development that become more difficult under constant observation. Watts would likely connect this to his teachings on ego and self-image. He believed that our preoccupation with how others see us creates a barrier to genuine living. The ego, he said, is nothing other than the focus of conscious attention. By reducing the attention placed on their digital representation, non-posters may be creating room for a more expansive, less ego-driven existence. This doesn't mean they lack ego or self-awareness. Rather, they've chosen to contain their sense of self within natural boundaries, free from the artificial expansion that social media provides. They've recognized that there's something psychologically healthier about being known deeply by a few than being seen superficially by many. The courage of anonymity also manifests in the willingness to miss out on the dopamine rewards that come with social media validation. Every like, comment, and share activates our brain's reward centers. By abstaining, non-posters demonstrate a remarkable ability to seek deeper, more sustainable forms of satisfaction, what psychologists might call intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation. There's also courage in accepting the social consequences of non-posting. In many circles, not having a social media presence can lead to exclusion from conversations, events, and connections. The non-poster accepts these potential losses, valuing their psychological freedom above social convenience. This brings us to an important distinction. The courage of anonymity isn't about fear of judgment, but about transcending the need for approval altogether. It's about understanding, as Watts taught, that you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. Social media, with its permanent records and memory features, makes this natural evolution more difficult. By remaining anonymous or minimally visible online, these individuals preserve their right to change, contradict themselves, and grow without explanation. They understand intuitively what many of us struggle to accept, that true security comes not from controlling how others see us, but from releasing the need to be seen in the first place. As we move forward to explore how this relates to validation and the emptiness of likes, we begin to see that the courage to remain anonymous in a world of exposure is really about something much deeper. It's about reclaiming the authority to define your own worth in your own terms. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. Building on our exploration of anonymity's courage, we now turn to something equally profound: the psychological freedom found in stepping away from the validation economy. Alan Watts frequently spoke about how our endless pursuit of external approval creates a particular kind of suffering. The desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing, he observed, pointing to how our quest for validation often leaves us feeling more empty than fulfilled. Those who don't post on social media have inadvertently discovered a powerful psychological truth. There is a certain emptiness to digital validation that never quite satisfies our deeper needs. Each like or comment provides a momentary spike of pleasure that quickly fades, leaving us craving more. A cycle that bears striking resemblance to what psychologists identify as addiction patterns. When we step outside this cycle, something remarkable happens to our mental landscape. The mind, no longer constantly anticipating external feedback, begins to reconnect with internal sources of meaning. Non-posters often report experiencing life more directly, finding satisfaction in experiences themselves rather than in others' reactions to them. This shift represents what Watts would call a move from ego consciousness to a more integrated awareness. He believed that our fixation on separate identity, now amplified through digital profiles, creates an illusion of isolation that social media paradoxically worsens, even while promising connection. By not feeding this system, non-posters may experience less of the anxiety and loneliness that often accompanies heavy social media use. The liberation comes not from rejecting connection, but from transforming how we relate to others and ourselves. Without the constant numeric feedback of likes and follow accounts, non-posters must develop more nuanced ways of gauging their own value and the quality of their relationships. They discover that meaningful human connection rarely translates into quantifiable metrics. Research increasingly supports this intuition. Studies show that people who base their self-worth on external validation report lower overall well-being than those who develop internal standards. By not participating in the like economy, non-posters are forced to develop these internal barometers of value, a challenging but ultimately rewarding psychological task. Consider how differently we might approach activities when removed from the validation loop. A hike becomes about connection with nature rather than capturing the perfect summit photo. A meal becomes about taste and company rather than aesthetic arrangement. Conversations become about exchange rather than quotable moments. In each case, the experience gains depth by losing its performative dimension. What's particularly interesting is how non-posters relate to achievement. Without the immediate reward of public recognition, they must find motivation in personal satisfaction or intrinsic value. This often leads to more sustained effort and deeper engagement with tasks that matter to them. As Watts suggested, the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Advice that's easier to follow when we're not pausing constantly to document the dance for others. The mind, liberated from external validation, also becomes more resilient to criticism. When our sense of self isn't continuously reinforced or threatened by public feedback, we develop a more stable core identity. Non-posters often report caring less about others' opinions, not out of arrogance, but from a centered sense of self that doesn't require constant reinforcement. This liberation extends to how we process emotions as well. Without the pressure to present a curated emotional life online, non-posters can experience their feelings more authentically. Sadness doesn't need to be transformed into poetic melancholy. Joy doesn't need to be performance-worthy. The full spectrum of human emotion becomes available without the filtering question of how will this play to an audience. As we transition to thinking about how non-posters observe without reacting, we can see that the emptiness of likes reveals a fuller way of living, one where validation comes from within, meaning emerges organically, and the mind finds freedom in its own quiet authority rather than in the fleeting approval of a digital crowd. Moving from the emptiness of external validation, we discover another fascinating dimension of those who don't post on social media: their capacity to witness without immediately responding. This quality connects deeply to what Alan Watts described as the wisdom of insecurity, a state where we can observe life without grasping at it or pushing it away. The silent observers among us have developed a rare skill in today's reaction-driven world. They consume information, witness discussions, and observe trends without feeling compelled to publicly announce their position on everything they encounter. This restraint isn't about indifference. Rather, it reflects a deeper understanding that not every thought deserves immediate expression. Watts often emphasized the value of what he called the silent mind, the capacity to experience without constant internal commentary. He suggested that through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. Silent observers on social media embody this principle by choosing to take in the digital world without adding to its noise. Psychologically, this stance offers significant benefits. Research shows that the habit of immediate reaction often leads to polarization, heightened emotional states, and simplified thinking. By creating space between observation and response, non-posters develop more nuanced perspectives. They give themselves time to integrate new information, consider multiple viewpoints, and arrive at more thoughtful conclusions. This approach also creates a different relationship with information itself. Instead of treating each piece of news or content as something demanding an immediate reaction, silent observers can see broader patterns emerging over time. They become skilled at distinguishing between momentary outrage cycles and genuinely important developments, a crucial skill in an era of information overload. There's wisdom in recognizing that not every conversation benefits from our participation. Non-posters understand that sometimes the most valuable contribution is simply paying attention. They've discovered what Watts meant when he said, "The art of living is neither careless, drifting on the one hand, nor fearful, clinging on the other. It consists in being sensitive to each moment, in regarding it as utterly new and unique." This sensitivity extends to how they process emotions triggered by social media content. Rather than immediately channeling reactions into posts, comments, or shares, they allow themselves to experience their emotional responses privately. This creates space for more authentic processing without the distortion that comes from crafting reactions for an audience. The capacity to absorb without reacting also shapes how these individuals navigate relationships. They tend to be better listeners in conversation, more attentive to subtle cues, and less likely to interrupt with their own experiences or opinions. Having practiced restraint online, they bring this quality of presence to their in-person interactions. Non-posters often develop a particular kind of attention that might be called receptive awareness, the ability to fully receive information without immediately categorizing, judging, or responding to it. This quality of mind becomes increasingly valuable in a world where reactive thinking dominates, allowing them to see connections and nuances that others might miss in their haste to respond. There's also an ecological dimension to this wisdom. In an attention economy that profits from emotional engagement, choosing not to react represents a form of conscious consumption. Silent observers refuse to have their attention and emotional responses weaponized for profit, maintaining sovereignty over their internal experiences. As we prepare to explore how this connects to authenticity in our next section, we can see that the wisdom of silent observation isn't about passivity. It's about a more intentional way of engaging with information, emotions, and relationships. It's about creating space for genuine understanding before expression, depth before reaction, and wisdom before words. In their quiet witnessing, non-posters remind us of a truth Watts often emphasized. Sometimes the most powerful way to engage with the world is simply to be fully present with it. As we move from the wisdom of silent observation, we encounter perhaps the most profound aspect of those who abstain from social media posting, their journey toward authentic selfhood. This quest for genuine expression connects directly to what Alan Watts called the real you, that essential nature often obscured by social conditioning and, now, digital performance. The concept of authenticity has become increasingly complex in our digital age. We craft online personas that represent edited versions of ourselves, creating what psychologists call the highlight reel effect, where we compare our behind-the-scenes reality to others' carefully curated public images. Those who don't post have intuitively recognized a troubling truth. The more we invest in these digital representations, the more our sense of authentic self can become compromised. Watts often spoke about how we lose ourselves in societal expectations, saying, "You are something that the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing." Social media amplifies this loss of self by encouraging us to fragment our experiences into postable moments, to translate complex emotions into simplified reactions, and to measure our worth through metrics of engagement. The non-poster has made a countercultural choice to preserve certain experiences as private, unmediated, and personal. This choice reflects what psychologists call self-determination, the need for autonomy and authentic self-expression that forms a cornerstone of mental well-being. By keeping parts of themselves offline, these individuals maintain boundaries around their identity that protect it from becoming a public commodity. This protection creates space for what Watts would call genuine individuality to emerge. Not the performative individuality of unique content creation, but the natural distinctiveness that arises when we stop trying to conform to external expectations. Many non-posters report feeling more aligned with their values and interests when freed from the subtle pressures of creating content that will resonate with an audience. The journey toward reclaiming authenticity involves reconnecting with internal barometers of meaning and value. Without the constant feedback loop of social validation, non-posters must develop stronger connections to their own sense of purpose, their personal standards of achievement, and their independent definitions of a life well lived. This internal anchoring provides stability that algorithms and audience reactions cannot. Interestingly, this authenticity often manifests in how non-posters approach relationships. Freed from broadcasting their connections online, they tend to invest more deeply in fewer relationships rather than maintaining larger networks of weaker ties. This quality over quantity approach reflects what Watts meant when he said true relationship involves the discovery of oneself in others and the discovery of others in oneself. The offline authentic self also experiences time differently. Rather than fragmenting experience into before, during, and after documentation, non-posters remain present throughout events. This continuity of awareness creates richer memories and deeper engagement, what psychologists call flow states, where we become fully absorbed in what we're doing rather than observing ourselves doing it. Reclaiming authenticity also means embracing the parts of ourselves that don't photograph well or fit into personal branding, the contradictions, uncertainties, and evolving aspects that make us fully human. Non-posters give themselves permission to be works in progress rather than finished products. Understanding what Watts meant when he said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." And then, as we transition to our final theme about reclaiming time, we see that authenticity isn't just about being true to oneself. It's about creating conditions where genuine selfhood can continuously emerge. By stepping back from the performance aspects of social media, non-posters aren't rejecting connection. They're seeking more direct, unmediated ways of being in relationship with themselves, others, and the world around them. In this quest, they embody Watts's profound insight that the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Building upon our exploration of authenticity, we arrive at perhaps the most tangible benefit experienced by those who don't post on social media, the reclamation of time and attention. This final dimension reveals how the psychological choice to abstain from posting connects directly to a transformed relationship with time itself, something Alan Watts explored extensively in his philosophy. "The real present," Watts once said, "is always an immeasurable now." For those who don't post on social media, this immediate experience of the present moment remains intact in ways that frequent posters might find elusive. Research estimates that the average person spends over 2 hours daily on social platforms, scrolling, posting, and responding. Non-posters reclaim this time, but more importantly, they reclaim the quality of attention they bring to their lives. This reclaimed attention creates what psychologists call time affluence, the subjective feeling of having enough time for meaningful activities. While everyone has the same 24 hours, non-posters often report experiencing time differently. Without the interruption of documentation and the fragmentation of experiences into shareable moments, time flows more continuously. Events are lived through, rather than paused for capture. Watts often spoke about our distorted relationship with time, noting how we tend to postpone living for an imaginary future. "We are living in a culture," he observed, "where we always think that something better is going to happen tomorrow." Social media exacerbates this tendency, creating a perpetual cycle of anticipating responses, planning future posts, and living for external validation. By stepping outside this cycle, non-posters orient themselves more fully in the present. The quality of activities changes significantly when they're undertaken for their own sake rather than as content potential. Reading becomes about absorption rather than quotable passages. Travel becomes about experience rather than enviable photographs. Conversations become about exchange rather than anecdotes to share later. In each case, the activity regains its inherent value rather than serving as raw material for digital performance. This shift affects creativity in particularly interesting ways. Many non-posters report deeper engagement with creative pursuits when freed from the pressure of sharing works in progress or finished products. The creative process becomes more personal, exploratory, and genuine, qualities that Watts would recognize as essential to meaningful creation. As he said, "The art of living is neither careless drifting nor fearful clinging, but a flowing with the course of events." Relationships, too, transform when time and attention are reclaimed from screens. Non-posters often describe richer in-person connections marked by fuller presence and deeper listening. Without the distraction of documenting experiences or checking for reactions to previous posts, they bring undivided attention to their interactions. This quality of presence embodies what Watts meant when he said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." The psychology behind this reclaimed time reveals something profound about human happiness. Research consistently shows that happiness correlates more strongly with experiences than possessions, and non-posters invest in experiences without the mediating layer of documentation. They've discovered that direct engagement often provides more satisfaction than shared engagement, aligning with Watts's observation that the highest happiness is the feeling of rapture that you are a living member of life. Perhaps most significantly, those who don't post often develop what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, pursuing activities because they're inherently rewarding rather than for external rewards like recognition or status. This shift from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation creates more sustainable happiness and deeper engagement with life's activities. As Watts might say, they've discovered that the dance itself is the point, not the audience's applause. The life beyond screens isn't about rejection of technology, but about intentional use that serves genuine human needs. Non-posters often use technology in ways that enhance rather than diminish their lives, for learning, connection, and creativity rather than validation and performance. They embody a balanced approach that Watts would appreciate, neither rejecting modern tools nor being controlled by them. As we complete our exploration of the psychology of those who don't post on social media, we see that their choice reflects a deeper wisdom about human needs and flourishing. In reclaiming their time, attention, and direct experience, they haven't withdrawn from life but engaged with it more fully. They remind us of what Watts understood so well, that the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. And that this dance happens most beautifully when we're fully present for it, undistracted by how it might look to others watching from their screens. In the end, those who choose digital silence may have discovered what Alan Watts spent his life teaching, that our obsession with documenting, sharing, and receiving validation for our experiences often prevents us from truly living them. Their choice isn't a rejection of connection, but a profound reclaiming of it in its most authentic form. As we race to capture moments for others, perhaps we miss the moment itself. As we curate our digital selves, our authentic selves quietly fade into the background. The wisdom of the non-poster invites us all to ask, what might we discover about ourselves, our relationships, and our world if we occasionally put down the phone, step away from the performance, and simply experience life as it unfolds, raw, unfiltered, and gloriously present? The answer, as Watts might say, lies not in another post, but in the silence between them, where real life has been waiting all along.